Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around and we'll leave you with a movie to watch over the weekend with your family or that special someone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, the host of What to Watch Wednesdays, the show where we talk about 3 movies all in one episode. For today's episode of What to Watch Wednesdays, I'd like to preamble a bit and talk about my track record here. For those of you who have been listening in for quite a long time, you know that I talk about a lot of iconic trilogies. Sometimes they're related, like Star Wars and The Matrix and, what's another good example besides Star Wars and The Matrix? I don't have any off the top of my head, but you know what I'm talking about. Alongside that, I also tend to talk about 3 movies by the same director, or sometimes 3 that are mildly related, but maybe not directly connected. Tonight's show is an interesting mix of both worlds, I would say, because the 3 movies we're talking about are all within the same franchise, but they don't have the same directors, they don't have the same teams behind them, and they're all from 3 very different eras, both in cinema and in the history of the world. What could I possibly be talking about? Good question. How about I get to that? The 3 movies we're talking about are the first 3 movies in the Alien series. That's right. The movie series that is about an alien. I'm gonna let it sit there for a second while you guys ponder the madness of a movie series called Alien being about an alien. As you sit and ponder, I'll go over our watch list, which consists of Alien from 1979, Aliens from 1986, and Alien³ from 1992. I want to say before we go off to break that it's very interesting to me that it was never on my radar to talk about the Alien movies, specifically the first 3. I don't know, it just never really came into my head. And it's really interesting to hear myself say that, because if I'm being honest, the original Alien warrants watching the next 2 and being able to talk about it here on the show. So when we come back, we will jump into Alien from 1979 to discover exactly why that is. So stick around. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Alien from 1979, available to watch now on places like YouTube and Amazon through renting. The basic plot summary of Alien from 1979 follows the crew of the spaceship Nostromo as they receive an urgent distress beacon from a ship, more so, that is located on a nearby planet. I didn't want to say that the beacon was coming from the planet directly, because it's more so coming from the ship that is located on the planet being called LV-426. As they reach LV-426, they get to the ship that is sending out the distress beacon. Getting on board the ship, they find an interesting discovery. There's a lot of eggs and strange technology, implying that this ship is very clearly alien technology. As one of them gets way too close to one of the eggs, the egg hatches. And rather unfortunately, things just go downhill from there. If you are not familiar at all with the rest of what happens in Alien, let me tell you right now, highly recommend just stop listening and go watch the movie. That's my recommendation. If you have no idea what you're getting into, somehow, that is the best, that is the most I can tell you without it ruining everything about it. So, for the most of you who are still left, who know exactly what Alien is about and have probably seen it, or if not, at least know the basic idea of it, let's continue on. As you know, after the man, one of the crew members of Nostromo, that is, gets attacked by one of the aliens, he gets an alien planted in his body, and then the alien hatches, and then it gets a lot worse from there. We're going to stop with the plot summary there. That's all you really need to know. You probably already know where the story goes. And you probably already know that Alien from 1979 deserves, more so than many other movies out there, its signifier of absolute classic. Alien from 1979, the original, is just absolute classic cinema. It came out at exactly the right time, made the exact right impact that it needed to, and I can see for all of its strengths and weaknesses why it is remembered as fondly as it is. Now, when I say that, you hear me say weaknesses, and you're like, what do you mean weaknesses? Isn't it good? Yes, it's very good, as a matter of fact. It's so good that I'd rather not talk about all of the high-level strengths of Alien. And I actually want to talk about some of the weaknesses of the original Alien. They're very minute, and they're not all that important to remember. But I think they're worth talking about. I think it's worth bringing them up and mentioning them here. So indulge me for a moment while I go over them. Personally, I think the big issue with Alien is when it gets going, it's going. It's going really strong, really good. It's amazing when it gets going. The problem is that I think it has a bit of a growing pain and not exactly the most graceful way of getting things started. When the crew of the Nostromo wake up in the Nostromo after being in the advanced science hypersleep, whatever, it's kind of a slow burn until they get the distress signal. And even then, when they get the distress signal, they kind of waffle around and they're just kind of, I guess, going through the motions would be the best way to describe it. They're kind of just doing stuff. There isn't really any in-depth character conversations. Maybe one or two are interesting, but nothing's really being achieved until they get to the alien spacecraft on LV-426. Of course, once they get to the ship and once the egg hatches and attaches itself to one of the crew members, then things start ramping up and it gets going really good after that. Once things start going wrong, it's when things get interesting. Of course, that goes for stories in general, because what I'm basically trying to tell you is that when things are going wrong, that means things are happening. And when things are happening in a story, that means the story is interesting to experience. And when nothing is happening, it's not as interesting to experience. So, of course, that's a very general description, but I think Alien from 1979 really could have lost me if it didn't have that moment of the egg hatching. I'm being honest here. I think it's one of the few examples of the times where if it didn't have that kickoff, I don't think I would have been invested enough to watch the rest of it. So it's got that as a kind of caveat, but not exactly really. I just find it interesting how, I suppose, put off I was up until that point. So, moving on from that, I will also say that I honestly think Ellen Ripley, the character played by Sigourney Weaver, our main protagonist, as it were, I think she is just fine. I personally do not believe that Ellen Ripley really comes into her own until the second movie. I think in the first movie, she's like a lot of these stories that are, I guess, best example would be horror movies, where they make it in the beginning and they don't exactly know who's going to be the main character, like Ash from Evil Dead. They don't exactly know who's going to be the main focus. So they kind of focus on some of the other minor characters, and that kind of ends up hurting who ends up being the main protagonist by the end of it. That goes for Ripley 100%. It's a lot less focused than some of my favorite female main characters. Good examples would probably be Sarah Connor from Terminator, Trinity from Matrix, and obviously Princess Leia from Star Wars. But they felt like they were written to be major characters. Ripley herself, I don't feel like was written to be a major character. It feels more so that they basically figured out while they were writing it that they were going to make her a major character, if that makes any sense. I don't think her writing is as strong as some of the most well-remembered female characters. Now, that's not to say that she's bad. I think she just ranks below Sarah Connor for me. So basically what I'm saying is when you stack her up against one of the most kick-butt awesome characters in all of cinema, she doesn't hold her own perfectly, but still manages to rank just below her. Yes, what a massive criticism on my end. I'll move on and say, finally, I think the thing about the original Alien is that the alien itself is not scary. I know I might get flack for this, but let me explain. Personally, I was more unsettled and disgusted by the xenomorph design. The H.R. Geiger very interesting design reference is style of designing a character. I find that the xenomorph in the original movie is really a good sort of vessel for suspense and build up, but the payoff itself, that being the xenomorph, isn't as up to snuff as I was expecting it to be. It wasn't everything I was told it was. It wasn't the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. Of course, I could always eat my words on that, and I definitely would, and I definitely will more so. Because in our next movie, Aliens, I'll be honest, I kind of ate my words almost completely. When we come back from the break, we will jump into Aliens, so stick around for that. 88 won the Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Aliens from 1986, available to watch now on YouTube and Amazon through renting. For the basic plot summary of Aliens, we jump ahead 57 years after the events of Alien from 1979, as Ellen Ripley is rescued from hypersleep and brought back to LV-426 in order to save colonists who have colonized the planet of LV-426. In response to the fact that the company that she was working for in the original movie has lost all contact with LV-426 and needs her on as a consultant. Because in the first movie, her crew did go to LV-426 and they were familiar with the, I suppose, landscape, or more so came into contact with something on LV-426, which resulted in a lot of bad things happening. I can't get too specific, otherwise I would spoil the plot of Alien from 1979. So all you really need to know is this takes place quite a while after the first movie, and it's kind of a contrived sort of, we gotta go back to the planet because we need to go back to the planet. But it's also because we've lost contact. But here's the deal. When I describe this out loud, and when I think about it, I tend to fall into the camp, I suppose, of if you tell me that your sequel takes place 57 years after the events of your original movie and is in a completely different universe almost, with a completely new set of characters that I have to follow alongside of with our main character, I'm going to be kind of suspicious of it actually working as a movie. I'm just being honest here. I had every expectation. Well, not every expectation, but I wouldn't misjudge a person who told me I never thought Aliens would work. I never thought the movie Aliens would be a good idea. On paper, it really doesn't sound like a good idea. And that makes it, I suppose, even all the more interesting that Aliens from 1986 is probably the textbook definition of how to do a good sequel to a classic movie. Again, crazy to hear those words coming out of my mouth, but there's so many things that Aliens does right that it makes it so difficult for me to call it an unworthy follow-up or a bad one in any stretch of the imagination. There's more things happening. There's more territory that gets covered. We have a stronger attachment to Ripley as a character. The events happening to her feel more real. There feels to like there's more stakes, more interest, there's just a lot more of it. And at the same time, it achieves more with its more, right? They say less is more. Well, this is James Cameron directing the movie. So in his case, more is more, I suppose. To get more specific, I think one of the big reasons I actually ended up really liking Aliens is, quite honestly, because there's a lot more aliens. There's a lot more xenomorphs. I know it's kind of in the title, but think about it. When you call a movie Aliens, you expect there to be more than one alien in it. And there was quite a lot of aliens. And you know how dangerous the original Alien was? The single alien was? Now there's a whole bunch of them. Imagine how much more dangerous that can be. I think that's a really good way of describing how much better Aliens is than I was expecting. It shows you more and does more with its massive scale. I keep saying it, but if I could hammer it down into you, Aliens achieves more with going into the genre of action. The original Alien was a very good sci-fi horror movie, but it was just a good sci-fi horror movie. Aliens is a very good action sci-fi horror suspense movie with elements of, I suppose, philosophical conflict and the nature of the human condition sprinkled in there to kind of just wet the whistle a little bit. All that from a movie where there's also multiple scenes of people just shooting at aliens with big guns. How did they achieve this? Well, I think part of it is because of Newt. If you're not familiar with Aliens whatsoever, let me explain very quickly. When they get to LV-426, they essentially go into the colony, which is where a bunch of colonizers lived. The one that sent out a distress signal, or more so, stopped sending any signal at all, which caused the company that Ripley works for to send her and a bunch of Marines to the planet to investigate. When they reach the colony, they find a lot of colonists aren't alive anymore, but one person has survived. A young girl by the name of Newt. It sounds like Root for some reason. I think I get her confused with the young girl in Hunger Games. Point of the fact is that Newt is a very interesting character. She's the one that you see on the poster with Ripley, the small child that she's holding. I was not expecting to grow as attached to Newt as I ended up being. She's a lot better at being an actual character than just being a small child. She has an interesting level of depth to her and provides a different perspective on the xenomorphs themselves and the effects of their attacks and the ways that this society even functions that I wasn't expecting. I think through the mind of a child, these things would be a lot more scary than they already are. And the fact of the matter is that Newt is pretty much just completely broken by the fact that she's seen a xenomorph. I can't say I blame the kid, but it threw me for a complete loop to see a big budget action movie from the 80s with elements of horror in it. Also have this very deep existential undercurrent of what happens when somebody is raised in this environment where these things exist. It was a complete left turn that doesn't feel out of place somehow. And the reason I spend so much time on it is because it was the biggest reason I really liked Aliens. Because let me tell you this, when I tried watching Aliens for the first time, I quit about 30 minutes into it for a very good reason. I couldn't stand the Marines. The Marines were all meatheads with nothing to offer, no attachment, or any form of, I suppose, human emotion in them other than yar-dar-dar-dar. That's how I'm going to describe them. Yar, which is essentially just a simplified way of saying we're going to kill everything and leave no bodies when it comes to aliens. That's it. And we're going to keep doing that for the rest of our lives. Not exactly the most endearing characters, but upon actually giving Aliens a shot, I realized that there's an expertise to the craftsmanship of even the Marines that is also shown in the craftsmanship given to people like Newt and Ripley, which is that you tend to grow attached to the ones that they want you to grow attached to, and the ones that are still there after a kind of initial mess up tend to be the more interesting ones, or the ones with something to actually provide in the context of the story. And so I can't actually in good conscience say that they ruined the movie at all. After giving it a good chance, I can definitely say that they added more to Aliens than they took away. Rather unfortunately, I cannot say the same for some of the side characters in our next movie, which will be Alien 3. So stick around after the break, where we jump into that. 88 won the Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Alien 3 from 1992, available to watch now on YouTube and Amazon and other services by renting. For the basic plot summary of Alien 3, after being rescued from hypersleep yet again, Ellen Ripley finds herself on a mysterious planet that is home to a prison filled with only men, a maximum security prison filled with criminals. And she has brought another alien egg to the planet somehow. They don't really explain it, just kind of happens. It ends up in the pod with her, and it's there, and it's... Okay, I can't do this anymore. They lost me. Am I the only one who felt like they got lost when they watched Alien 3? Is that just me? Is that only me? Because I don't think it is. I really don't think it is. I apologize for possibly yelling very loudly just there. But I cannot, in good conscience, lie to any of you and say that I did not feel lost or betrayed or slighted in some way experiencing Alien 3 for the first time. And when I say first time, I also want to clarify, it'll be the last time, only time, first, last, and only time that I will sit down and willingly watch Alien 3. From this point forward, in order to vent even more of my frustration in a small way, I'm going to refer to Alien 3 as Alien³ for the remainder of my review. Because if you look at the stylization of the name Alien 3, you will see that they put the 3 in the superscript tiny little 3 up above, implying that this is in fact Alien³, not Alien 3. So I will call it Alien³, because I would rather not call it Alien 3. The fact that this is even considered a sequel to Alien and Aliens boggles my mind. Why on earth does this movie have a cult following? I kind of understand it, but at the same time, I kind of don't. And when I say I really don't fully understand it. I don't want this to come across as an attack, actually. I won't say that even though I don't understand it, I won't fault people for considering it a good movie or liking it. But I'd like to tell you now, right now, with evidence, why I don't like Alien 3, Alien³. I'm going to switch back and forth between the two of them. It'll be so inconsistent that it'll give myself a headache. It'll give myself a headache, and I'll be the one doing it. Here's the point. Here are, in kind of sequential order, my main issues with Alien³. The first is all coming down to Ellen Ripley herself as a character. They outright ruined her. One of the most frustrating things to watch was to watch Alien from 1979, see her react to the alien that gets on board her ship, have to deal with all of that, basically damaging psychiatric trauma, watching all of her friends be attacked by an alien, some of her crewmates as well. That wasn't fun. And to see her 57 years after the fact in Aliens needing to tell people, hey, there is an alien. Can we look after that? Can we go take care of that? Please? That would be great. Why aren't you listening to me? To watch her struggle through all of that, and then to have the first half of Alien³ be dedicated to her avoiding answering the simple question of why are you nervous? When her reason for being nervous is because she thinks there was an alien on board her spacecraft that she brought with her to the prison, is infuriating. It's infuriating to watch this character who has never been one to shut up and not tell people about the literal demon from unimaginable realms that has followed her all throughout the rest of her life. It's so incredibly difficult to imagine that character and that relationship being enough. It's so hard to articulate because I'm getting so angry that I can't remember where I'm leaving off on my sentences. It doesn't feel like Ripley for her to not bring it up. That's what I'm trying to say right now. It's actually making me really frustrated. It's frustrating to watch. The reason I'm frustrated is because I'm channeling how I felt watching it. It's frustrating to see a confident strong female character who has this monster following her not bring it up? I get it. She's in a prison filled with murderers and awful people. But all she has to do is say there's an alien. It's not that hard. But she avoids it like 5 times. Okay. I'm going to move on. Otherwise, I will yell consistently. This infuriates me. So I'm going to move on and talk about the other characters. The side characters. The ones that I hyped up weren't as good as the ones in Aliens. That's because they aren't. All of the prisoners existing at this prison are either forgettable, inconsequential, or just downright annoying. That's funny. A funny little flub has now drastically improved my mood. Here's the point. I will give them credit. When I say that they are annoying, forgettable, or inconsequential, not one character, not one prisoner was ever all 3 of those things at once. They were either or one of those 3 things. So it at least has that going for it. I will also say that notoriously Alien³ it's well known for having gone through multiple rewrites, not really having anything to go off of when they first started making it, and kind of being held together by bits and pieces. Just because it's notorious for that doesn't mean it doesn't negatively affect the movie. If anything, I can now tell and can honestly point to all of the points in this movie where you can tell that it's held together by staples and tape. So that's not exactly a good thing either. I will also say, as my final thought on Alien³ that the thing that infuriated me the most is we went from Alien being about one alien, to Aliens being about many aliens, to Alien³ being about a single alien yet again. That may not seem like a complaint, but it felt, in the way that they did it, it felt way too much like they were trying to be the original movie. It felt too much like they were trying to be Aliens as well, and they couldn't really figure out which of the two they wanted to be more, so they tried meshing them together, and it didn't work at all. I think if they wanted to do this right, they should have had more than one fully grown xenomorph. They should not have had Ripley in there if they were going to destroy her character, and I think they should have worked on making the side characters within the prison a lot more likable, memorable, or interesting. I think Alien³ Alien³ could have been a good sequel, but I'm incredibly annoyed, personally, to see a lot of people say that it already is that, because personally, I do not believe that in any way, shape, or form. With that being said, thank you all for listening in to What to Watch Wednesdays tonight. I know we're ending on kind of an angry note, but that's what happens when you watch a movie that you don't really like. You tend to get a bit angry, and I tend to get a bit angry because I didn't really like Alien³ but I did like Alien and Aliens. So if you take anything away from this positive, then I highly recommend the first 2 movies. They're really, really good, in my opinion, and more so have been highly rated and deserve all the high ratings they get. With all that being said, again, thank you for listening in. If you're interested in following up with What to Watch Wednesdays, check out the Instagram and YouTube pages at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces. On the Instagram page, you'll see after show reviews, and on the YouTube channel, you'll be seeing, I guess, backlogs of the old episodes of the show being uploaded every Wednesday as soon as the new show goes out. With all that being said, I will also be on, I believe, this Sunday on What to Watch Weekends, here on 88.1 The Burg at 8 p.m. as always, with a longer show and talking about some more of the Alien movies. So if you're interested, please do be sure to tune into that. And I will also be back next Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg, as I always am, for What to Watch Wednesdays, where I'll be telling you all what to watch. Good night.